Mackenzie Johnston with Tri-State Livestock News, bringing you discussions concerning fair cattle markets. Today we have the opportunity to chat with Ted Baum. He is the owner and operator of Elgin Livestock, located in Elgin, Nebraska. Can you just tell me a little bit about your background and your involvement within the cattle industry?
Grew up on a ranch southwest of Elgin, Nebraska. My dad ran a ranch and livestock market since, he's been in the ranching business forever, but had a opportunity to purchase a livestock market in 1960. I guess in 1979, Dad and I bought the last partner out of the livestock market, so it's been a family-owned, operated thing since 1979. Since Dad passed away, I've been managing the barn since about 85.
So what do you feel are the biggest issues standing in the way of fair cattle markets?
Packer concentration and vertical integration into the protein market by the packing industry.
What solutions do you think we should implement to fix those issues?
I don't know if there are anything that we can do to fix those issues because we've tried with hearings, and the Department of Justice looked into packer corruption, and it's obvious that they've been bought off and paid off, and nothing will happen because of it.
There's been a lot of talk about increasing negotiated cash trade. What are your thoughts on Senator Grassley's 5014 legislation?
Obviously, we need something in order to turn the playing field a little more visual so that we have a cash market that people can look at and see versus, you hear on the radio a lot of times, unknown disclosure or packer confidentiality that they won't report it. And if that's the case, why do we have to have a on-feed report reported once a month and an inventory report every other month? Why can't we have producer confidentiality?
What are your thoughts on mandatory country of origin labeling?
Every piece of clothing I have on, including my beef checkoff hat that's made in Taiwan or Indonesia, somewhere like that, every piece of clothing that I have on is labeled. Everything that we buy at the grocery store, whether it's a watermelon from Mexico or wherever, everything is labeled except beef products. And why are they not labeled? Because the packing industry makes too much money importing lower quality beef into the United States, grinding it as hamburger, doing whatever they can, and selling it as native U.S. beef. And our beef checkoff people let it happen. They won't differentiate the difference between cattle that are not raised in the United States. And that happens because when you call it the NCBA, basically the National Cattlemen's Association and Beef Association, you got the packer on the board, which is the same thing as putting the fox in the hen house. Don't work.
What are your thoughts on the petition that is circulating to bring about a referendum with the beef checkoff?
As a livestock market owner and a beef producer myself, the cattlemen are sick and tired of paying the bill. We're doing all the advertising, and the packer is the only one benefiting from the advertising. And we're footing the bill. Mm-hmm. The producer, the sale barns, we got to collect all that beef checkoff funds. We get nothing for it, other than once a year they call us up and want to know if they can put some beef checkoff information in the sale barn.
What do you think will happen to the independent American cattle producer if substantial changes aren't made to reach fair cattle markets?
Same thing that's happened in the hog business and chicken business, and it's coming quicker than you think because there's so much vertical integration out there in the cattle industry right now that a lot of these smaller feeders are gone. You go into like northeast Nebraska, there used to be lots of farmer feeders. They're all gone. And now there's 50-some trucks coming through Elgin every day, go to Greeley, Colorado, to the JBS plant. And we know that those cattle are all being fed for JBS. And they gobble up those little feed yards. And what happens is your cattle on feed report becomes completely skewed because those little feed yards were never counted before. And if you take, just for instance, and draw a square on a piece of paper and take Each one of those, and make 4 squares. Each one of those squares was a cattle feeder that fed 750 head. Okay, 2 of those guys quit. Or your big feedlots, they expand. They absorbed those 2 guys that quit that had 750 head. What just happened? Your on-feed report got skewed 25%, but there's no more cattle. And then if you look at that, okay, we've been killing 117 to 119,000 head of cattle ever since we pretty much got back online after the COVID deal. Prior to COVID, we were killing 112 to 120,000 cattle per day. Other than the times when COVID was the worst at the packing houses, that inventory never changed. So why do we have on-feed cattle reports that tell us that we have all these cattle, and then the on-feed numbers never change? You look at the COVID thing. When we had Corbett Wall, good friend of mine, saying we got 1 million cattle to clean up after this COVID thing because of the COVID deal and the shutdown of the packing industry, and it slowed the packing deal down, so we've got 1 million cattle out there in the country to pick up. What happened to them? They obviously disappeared. They weren't there to start with. So how much did that cost the American rancher and the cattle producer? Because all the time they're blowing, we got 750,000 extra big fat cattle that we got to get killed or that are going to come to market, and they never did. Because obviously, if that would have happened, our daily kill numbers would have went way up. Never did. Now all of a sudden, them cattle are gone. Well, how much did that cost us? $10 a hundred? $15? $15 a hundred on a 1,300-pound steer is how much money?
Too much?
Exactly. You start thinking about it in terms of dollars per head, and take that times 1,500-pound steer. 15 times, that's $150 a head. $150 a head times 117,000 head per day is how much money? It's huge. And that's money that's gone from rural Nebraska, rural America. Never come back. You know, you take $150 a head times 117,000. Take that times 5 days a week.
That's staggering.
It's unbelievable. And all that money's going to who? Tyson Foods, JBS, what's left of Cargill, your 4 major packers. And they're turning around and buying senators left and right. You know, I wrote letters to both my senators in the state of Nebraska about what's going on in the packing industry. What do I get back? I get a letter from Deb Fisher, says we appreciate your concern. Ben Sass don't even respond. I've got 2 letters from one of our senators from Nebraska hanging on my bulletin board at home. Both of them are exactly the same. We appreciate your concern. And I wrote a letter to so-and-so and another letter to so-and-so and a letter to Pat Roberts. Well, sending a letter to Pat Roberts, and Pat Roberts, Kansas is a corporation feeding state. Pat Roberts is like talking to a wall. You're not getting anywhere there. He's the head of the Ag Committee. But, I mean, you're not going to get anywhere because they're all bought and paid for. And when you start talking about the numbers that I'm talking about, $150 a day times 117,000 times 5 days a week times 50 weeks a year, that money is staggering, and that money is leaving rural America.
Earlier you mentioned that vertical integration is coming upon us quicker than we think. If you were to speculate, how soon do you see vertical integration totally taking over the cattle industry?
Within the next 10 years. Look at the hog deal. 20 years ago, we used to sell 800 to 1,000 head of hogs every Monday morning for our local farmers. Now, to my knowledge, we have 1 or 2 local farmers that are still in the hog business in Antelope County. I used to have a stack of business cards that I couldn't reach around with my fingers of hog producers. They're all gone. Now you got your corporate feeders. They got that hog market sewed up to where the small guy doesn't stand a chance unless he's selling hogs to strictly your rural trade, people that want dirt-raised hogs or one here to butcher and one there to butcher. And I'd hate to try and have 20 head of sows on my farm or ranch and try and cater to, well, is he going to come buy a pig today or not?
Heading into this fall with the big fall run of calves coming on, what is your outlook for the market?
The market, I think, is not going to be great. You know, you might break even. You're not going to make any money. They won't let you. You know, like right now, the yearling market for these yearling cattle that are coming off grass, most of them are already gone. But, I mean, we have yearling cattle weighing 900 pounds bringing $1.40. Fat cattle at $1.06. That ain't going to work.
Yeah, that doesn't work. How are they paying that much for feeder cattle right now?
Well, that's where you come into with your packer integration and your sweetheart deals with these some of these feedlots that are feeding cattle strictly for JBS or Tyson Foods. The ordinary farmer or producer, he's out here at the mercy of the packer coming out here and saying, well, give $1.06 for these cattle. Well, these sweetheart deals or packer integration where they feed for these companies, they're probably saying, okay, you buy these cattle and we'll guarantee you $150 or $200 a head profit. You feed them for us and no questions are asked.
Do you have an outlook for the fed cattle market through the rest of the year?
I really don't. You know, that whole market depends on our on-feed reports and how many of these cattle are suppressed under packer conditions where, you know, they're non-disclosed. And our on-feed report, well, obviously, you know, they were telling us we had all these cattle and then all these cattle just magically disappeared. And, you know, there's no way of knowing how many cattle are actually out there. The winter of 2019, a ton of these cattle floated down the creeks in Nebraska. And how many is that? I don't know. But the USDA obviously never took that into account. You know, and then they come out on the radio one day and said, we've got so many million cattle floated down the river in Nebraska, 1.2 million, I think I heard. Well, there's only about 3 million cattle in Nebraska. Well, you know that ain't true.
We are seeing U.S. beef exports down so far this year compared to 2019 levels, and imports are up significantly. What are your thoughts on imports of cattle and beef overall?
Obviously, they're going to import cattle and beef into the United States anytime there's a shortfall. And as long as you've got foreign companies that are in the packing industry, why ain't they going to take care of their Brazilian beef before they take care of the United States guy?
The USDA has proposed implementing RFID tags for traceability across the industry by 2023. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's another deal where they're trying to force regulations onto the producer so the packer has more control of the market and they know exactly how many numbers are out there before we even start.
What are some of the main concerns you're hearing from your customers who sell there at Elgin Livestock?
What's the future of the market going to do? What are we going to do with our calves 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Or will we even be in business?
Do you have any other statements you want to make regarding cattle markets or the cattle industry?
I really don't. It's just depressing. And then when you stop and think about, somebody says, well, yeah, I lost $150 a head on 300 head of cattle. Well, that sounds like that's tragic. But when you put it into terms, when I lost $150 a head on 117,000 cattle, and do the math and figure that out, and figure out how many dollars are leaving rural America, and we have no way to get them back. And we get no political help or anything else because there's so much vertical integration in the markets that there's no sunshine on the other side.